Welcome into 49ers Access and happy 2024 49ers schedule release day. We are inching closer and closer to the 2024 NFL season every single minute, hour, and I cannot wait to dive into the San Francisco 49ers 18-week regular season 2024 schedule today with you. I want to kindly ask you to like, share, and subscribe because we are going to have a doozy today. We're going to dive into premier matchups, travel miles, and we'll even give you an early pre-OTAs record prediction for your and mine San Francisco 49ers. And without further ado, after you hit the like button and hit subscribe as we try to reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers before I move to Southern California and get married at the end of this month, let's dive into the San Francisco 49ers schedule. And to do so, we have to talk about everything else but the schedule itself. Not the games, not the matchups, not is it Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, but actually, let's talk about the travel miles for the San Francisco 49ers this year. The San Francisco 49ers will travel the fifth most miles of any team in the NFL for 24,575 miles. The fifth most miles of any team. And they will travel to the third most time zones, 28 this season. They'll be buzzing all over the United States this year. And thankfully, although I'm sure the UK, German, and Mexico City fans are bummed, San Francisco will not head overseas or play any international games this year, despite the NFL UK Twitter account using Deebo Samuel to get fans hyped, leading to many of us, including myself, to say, uh-oh, are the Niners going overseas? That's not the case. They are staying on this side of the pond of the Atlantic. They are staying put in the United States for one more year. Maybe next year, international fans. But keeping going here with the schedule talk, San Francisco are tied with 12th, or at 12th, with their opponents having a .505 win percentage. So in terms of strength of schedule, they have the 12th hardest schedule in the NFL based on opponents' win percentage. And so that brings us to the actual conversation of the schedule itself. 18 weeks, 17 games, 1 bye week. I want to say what's up to Bobo in the chat saying 6 prime times games. Sounds like a pretty hard schedule. And then Niner Sickness Podcast saying, what's up, homie? Go Niners. What's going on, Sickness Podcast? I cannot wait. Niner Media is in here too for some late night access. All good to have you along with us as we dive into the schedule talking conversation. And I think this day, mainly for myself, but I'm sure for others, kind of indicates the beginning of a brand new year. You had free agency, the NFL draft certainly could do that for you. But I think the schedule release kind of gets you pumped of, what's the record prediction, who are we playing on which days. Thankfully, again, not going overseas or to international games, and no holidays this year. Last season, San Francisco had the 1-2 punch of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and I believe they also had New Year's Day or Eve, one of those last year. So the holidays weren't too favorable to Niner fans last year, having losing on Christmas to the Ravens in pretty bad fashion. We're not going to have to deal with throwing our eggnog or our Thanksgiving turkey at the television this season or be celebrating with the Niners during Thanksgiving. We need to actually sit back and unwind and say, okay, the holidays are going to be anxiety-free. We get to watch other teams hopefully lose and move out of the way for us as we try to embark on another playoff run in 2024. But I think with all the good things, right, with all the talk of non-holiday play and this, that, and the other, I do think the schedule is pretty tough this year for the Niners. Now, I say that, and like the past 4 or 5 seasons, they could go to the NFC Championship game. Like, it just feels like no matter who they play, no matter what the year, San Francisco is going to find themselves towards the end of the playoff bracket, right? They're going to find themselves either in the divisional round game, NFC title game, or if all goes well, back in the Super Bowl. Hopefully not against Kansas City, That said, speaking of Kansas City, they do play them this year in a Super Bowl 58 rematch of the awful, awful game this past February. They played them in week 7, and that is one of 4 games San Francisco is going to have to face an opponent off the bye week. So they play Kansas City in week 7 off of Kansas City's bye week, while San Francisco does give some help with a long week playing the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday Night Football the previous week. So not the same, but Kansas City will have a few days extra to rest and prepare for the Niners at Levi Stadium in week 7. Week number 8, they get to play the Dallas Cowboys at home Sunday Night Football at Levi Stadium, but the Cowboys are going to be off their bye week, and then in 3 more weeks, they play Seattle week 11, Seattle off their bye week, and arguably outside of Kansas City, the toughest game on the docket in regards to teams off their bye week facing San Francisco is San Francisco has to travel all the way to Buffalo in December of all times during the year, week 13, Sunday Night Football, and take on Josh Allen and those Buffalo Bills. So 4 either hardy opponents, the Chiefs and the Bills, both those teams could be in the Super Bowl again this year. Dallas is always tough, albeit the record and box score might see otherwise. It's always a big game to get up for. And the Seattle Seahawks always seem to kind of have their nose with now a new head coach in the middle of the NFC West. So 4 massive games and 4 games where San Francisco is going to be playing with no rest at all, whereas their opponents are going to have a full week off prior to playing them. Let's talk about each game week by week. It's kind of the big stuff, right? The bye week, the holidays. But let's talk about each game week by week, because the San Francisco 49ers are going to host the New York Jets week 1 of the NFL season, Monday Night Football, not Thursday, not Sunday. We have to wait all the way until Monday of week 1, the finale of week number 1, to host Aaron Rodgers and his conspiracy theories and the ayahuasca, whatever else he does in his weird, awkward meditation room. And then you have Robert Saleh, Javon Kinlaw, Isaiah Oliver is now there. There are so many connections, all of that coming back to the Bay for, I think, for the first time since Saleh left for the Jets in 2021. So great reunion for everybody, but gotta go out there and make a statement. And this is funny because I just think this game is perfect for the Niners. Last year didn't end how you wanted it to. Rodgers tore his Achilles last year on Monday Night Football. It's a 1-year anniversary of that. I don't think he'll be running out there with the U.S. flag pre 9/11 like he was last year to celebrate in New York. I think he'll be in California, his home state, team he has never really had success against, especially in the playoffs. He'll be at Levi's for the first time in a Jets jersey. And that game, to me, is going to be a big test for San Francisco. The Jets obviously want to win now, had a pretty big offseason, kind of retooled their offensive line, added weapons in Mike Williams and whatnot. They have Sauce Gardner and Mooney Ward talking crap on Twitter and X. So there are a lot of ties between those two teams, and I couldn't think of a better way to kick off the NFL season between the Jets and Niners any better way. I want to see fireworks. I want to see touchdowns. I want to see some smash mouth football. And even this offseason, when you look at the ties between these two teams, San Francisco wanted to talk to Jeff Ulbrich, former Niner, to become their new defensive coordinator. That didn't happen, so a big test for Nick Sorensen, maybe a missed opportunity for Jeff Ulbrich to come back home to the Bay, and obviously Kyle Shanahan getting to hopefully put a pounding on former defensive coordinator Robert Saleh to begin 2024 feels pretty darn good of a way to begin the season. But that's their first of 6 primetime games. Then San Francisco gets to begin their year on a short week, right? Monday Night Football. Then they get to travel all the way to Minnesota on September 15th, week number 2, where they haven't won since 1992. 1992. Been a long time since a Niner team has won in Minnesota. I think Kyle Shanahan is 0-2 against the Vikings in Minnesota. They beat them in the playoffs in 2019, but they lost to them pre-Jimmy Garoppolo torn ACL in 2018. That was the amazing Dante Pettis catch in the back of the end zone. Then we lost to them last season. But again, there's more ties between Shanahan and the Niners and the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell being the former Rams offensive coordinator or quarterback coach. He's now out of the McVay coaching tree in Minnesota. But Sam Darnold is now the potential starting quarterback for the Vikings this year. So plenty of ties to go around. Hopefully Shanahan didn't teach Darnold to actually be a good quarterback this year. But I think those first two games for the Niners, like if you're going to have a short week, have it early in the year where you guys are rested, they're healthy, and they feel pretty good. That said, I think those first two games are games they both should win. It's games I think you would pencil W's next to if the season started tomorrow. And I think that, coming into the year, not that San Francisco has to prove really anything. Like, we know they're good. Everyone knows they're good. They're the reigning NFC champions for a reason. But I think that getting off to a hot start, knowing how tough the end of their schedule is, and we'll get to it in a few minutes, but it is daunting what December and November and early January look like for this team. So they have to get off to a hot start this year. And I think against the Jets, prime time, at home, you light up Rodgers, you go to Minnesota, beat Darnold into smithereens. That team is kind of retooling themselves. They got McCarthy waiting in the wings to be their quarterback. So I do think that San Francisco should start off pretty quickly. And in fact, I could argue they have to start out pretty quickly. Coming into this past year, a lot of the conversation around them was, are they going to be 3-5 or 4-4? They bucked that trend starting 5-0. I don't know if they'll go 5-0 this year, but I think starting off at least 2-0 doesn't go a long way, but it goes some way into helping them before the season gets really tough. So I like the first two games. You're not going to the East Coast to play the Jets. And honestly, when I saw the Jets on the schedule, I took a breath of just like, whew, sigh of relief. Thank God that game is not at MetLife. I mean, my heart would have just dropped out of my chest if this was week one at MetLife Stadium on that horrible, horrible, devil-cursed turf out there in New York. Just horrible. Thankfully, it's at Levi Stadium with the grass. Not going to have to worry about, knock on wood, torn ACLs and horrible turf. I mean, go back to 2020. I think we all remember how awful that was. Awful. Bosa, Thomas, Jimmy G, Raheem Mostert, insert every good player on this team, all went down in one game and it derailed the entire year. So thankfully that game is at Levi Stadium. Then week two in Minnesota, in a dome. Granted, I think you'd want the Minnesota game later on in the year simply because it's in a dome, whereas some games later in the season are open air stadiums, and it could be maybe a snow day for San Francisco in week 12 and 13 against Green Bay and the Bills, as Niner media hints at here, saying, I don't like playing the Packers and Bills at Lambeau and in Buffalo. So that takes us to week number 3. And I also like having a divisional game early in the season, right? It's also super important not just to win conference games or at home, but the Rams, who they do play in week 3 on the road at SoFi Stadium, the Rams have definitely not just coming off a good year, but the offseason they had, the draft they had, got a lot of players I wanted San Francisco to get. Bo Limmer, Jordan Whittington, just traded Ben Skoranek, but you have Cooper Kupp healthy and Puka Nacua. Tutu Atwell still there. And although Aaron Donald's not on the team anymore, they got Jared Verse. They added to that defensive line to hopefully retool it, make it younger and better and faster. So I think week 3 is arguably San Francisco's biggest test early on in the year, mind you, in that first kind of quarter of the season. You get Stafford, McVay, Purdy, Shanahan, and this 2 NFC West rivals going at it at SoFi. And I think it's important not just to win this game, but also if you can go 3-0. I think it puts you so far ahead of the pack, and 3 games isn't much. You could be 1 game ahead of the pack or tied for first place, mind you, but the next couple games are relatively easy, right? You have New England, and you have the Cardinals, who I think could surprise people this year, but if you can get past the Rams, there's a real chance you start the year 5-0 again. And if we're talking off to a fast start, this team only lost 3 or 4 games last year. So it's not as if they aren't accustomed to dropping a handful. And I think that if you win early, you can afford to lose a few games you should win, or just tougher games you can pencil L's next to, right? So I think getting off to a hot start, I could argue week 3 isn't a must-win, but it might be a must-win knowing how tough the end of the year schedule truly is for this team. I also love the fact that it's not just, Niners and Rams, right? Right now San Francisco holds the all-time lead of the series, 77-68, and San Francisco is 40-33-1 on the road against the Rams. San Francisco, under Kyle Shanahan, you know this, I know this, they own the Rams in the regular season, with I believe their only regular season loss coming last year, week 18, when the backups played. Taylor Hawkins got a pick and Jake Moody missed a PAT, which made it 21-20 Rams, and Carson Wentz played, so even that's kind of a fluke. And take it even further, San Francisco is looking for their 5th win at SoFi Stadium since 2020. I mean, they beat them 30-23 last year in September, so an early season game against the Rams, who I think is a team that ends really hot. Like last year, they got really hot towards the end of the year and kind of gave the Lions a push in, I think, the divisional round game, or if not that, the wild card round. I'd rather play the Rams early in the year, if not, love to play them twice, but I'll take them once early. Maybe you can steal an early win and keep control of that rivalry advantage over them and kind of hold the tiebreaker over their head for the majority of the year, because you don't play them again until week 15 on Thursday Night Football at home. So winning at SoFi, knowing what comes later in the year, and knowing that stretch you have where you have Green Bay, Buffalo, Chicago, then the Rams, that's a time where that stretch may not go in your favor. So getting them early, I think, is a good thing for the San Francisco 49ers. Then you go back home from Minnesota and LA up to Levi's to host the New England Patriots. The Patriots have a young quarterback, rookie quarterback, a rebuilding team. Gerard Mayo's now the head coach. They're trying to fix things and make everything work. Kendrick Bourne's coming back to the Bay for the first time, so it should be a nice reunion there between Debo and Ayuk. But I do think that, again, this is a game they should win pretty easily. I liken this, well, maybe not to the Bears game in 2022, but I liken this game, it's the way Belichick would handle young or rookie quarterbacks. He would just dismantle them. They'd never beat him. And I really don't think, I wouldn't compare Shanahan to Belichick. I just think that you coming off hopefully 3 wins in a row, you're back home off the road trip, you get to stay home for 2 games against the Patriots and the Cardinals. The first game, young quarterback, likely a rookie, unless they're playing Jacoby Brissett, and if that's the case, my God, you better win the game. But you're playing a bad team. You're playing a really bad team. And so I think, you get past the Rams, you continue to open up that realm of a hot start, and if you start 4-0, here we go. And I think, Bobo brings this up. Hopefully Brock Purdy goes to the next level and is the MVP this year. The Jets are a good defense. I don't think that's, not to say Brock Purdy couldn't beat them. Shanahan week 1, they usually aren't great week 1s, but I think prime time and get the extra day. There's going to be some jitters. I wouldn't be surprised if they win, but Brock Purdy struggles in week 1. But they bounce back against Minnesota. They play the Rams at SoFi. They get New England. There's a 3 or 4 game stretch here where Brock Purdy could be lights out and could be, in the MVP conversation again. But that question again is, can Brock Purdy repeat what he did last year? I would like to think so. The last 2 years have not been fluky to me. If they are to you, so be it. But I think Brock Purdy has done enough to prove himself to be a valuable starting quarterback. I do think there will be times this year where because of the elements, the opponent, he could struggle, but I have a hard time believing Brock Purdy is not going to carry over the success he had dating back to 2 years ago, carried over into last year. I think he can bring it over into this season and start off pretty hot. Maybe outside of that Jets game, but Minnesota in a dome. I get they have Brian Flores, but this Niners offense has more weapons. They'll hopefully be fully healthy. McCaffrey and Trent Williams and Debo. I think we'll see what that game should have looked like last year, this year, and you get the Rams, get a bad Patriots team. Which brings you to October, the first month of the year. You could be 4-0. You should be 4-0. You get the Cardinals. Now, I'm someone, maybe I'm in the minority here, but I really like what Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals have done this offseason, even dating back to last year. They got Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. They got Elijah Jones, a cornerback. They had a lot of good players that I think will actually be valuable pieces to them. And year 2 of Jonathan Gannon, I don't think they're going to be pushovers. Now, see if I can find it in my notes here, but they didn't take it to San Francisco, but the Cardinals weren't, at least offensively, they weren't really a pushover when Kyler Murray was on the field. You get Kyler Murray back off of the ACL after playing part of last season. You get him back for a full offseason program into the offense again for a second year with the new regime. You give him Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, Rondell Moore, I believe, is still there. He has some weapons. James Conner's still there. And the offensive line has improved. And they've also had so many picks because they stunk and traded away so many players that their defense should also be improved. So I don't think that game is going to be a walk in the park. And I also wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals beat the Niners this year or beat the Rams or beat Seattle. I just think the Cardinals are on the come up, if you will say. But now the question is, how high is that level for them? I don't think it's too high, but I do think they could be a team that actually surprises some good teams this year. And I think San Francisco, I wouldn't say it's in week number 5, mind you, but I think a game later in the year, week 18, obviously you could be resting your starters at that point, but that game in week 5 is at home. Maybe week 18, you have to win that game. Maybe you lose, right? I think the Cardinals are going to be a lot better than people think they're going to be, but I think they're still going to be 3rd or 4th place. I also wouldn't be shocked if the Cardinals kind of unseated Seattle as the 3rd team in the NFC West this year, barring injury, of course, which who knows what could happen. But by all means, I think San Francisco is at least 4-1 to begin the year, which takes us to their second primetime game in Seattle. So week 1 at home against the Jets. You fly to Minnesota on a relatively short week, Monday Night Football to Sunday, probably at 10 a.m. Go to Minnesota, then you come right back to the West Coast for 3 straight games at SoFi, then 2 at Levi Stadiums in a row. Then again, on the West Coast, but on a short week with Seattle. There's always tough games. Go to Seattle, Thursday Night Football, up in the Pacific Northwest, with a brand new head coach, McDonald, who took it to Shanahan last year as the Ravens defensive coordinator. They've kind of remade their team, had a relatively nice draft, drafted Byron Murphy, added some more pieces here or there. So, I'm really intrigued as to what Seattle will be this year, because McDonald last year beat the entire NFC West, and he's known as the Shanahan system stopper. So I think these matchups, although it's post-Pete Carroll for the first time since 2012, if I'm right, maybe 2011, not seeing him smacking that gum, like God, I would hate that. But, that's gone. It's McDonald now, and he brings a different kind of physicality where it may take a year or two for Seattle to kind of figure things out, but I am really interested to see what the Seahawks look like this year, because new regime, relatively new system, and if McDonald becomes the Shanahan stopper, not that would do the Niners in for a bad year, but it erases what has been in the past couple years been kind of a relatively easy win, where Geno Smith may stink as Laurie Matthews My girl, Lori Matthews in the chat, always taking care of rescue dogs and adopting cats. Lori from Phoenix, we love you. But you're right. I wouldn't trust Geno, and I think the Seattle offense shouldn't be trusted. I think it's the defense that worries me, where in previous years, I wasn't too concerned about scoring against that Seattle defense that had Jamal Adams and Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks. They've definitely taken a step back personnel-wise, but scheme-wise, I think it's a lot more better. A lot more better. It's much better. Words are hard, right? But I do think that Brock Purdy should be able to continue his success against Seattle. I wouldn't be, scared, but I do think those matchups become much less of a pushover or an easy W than they were the past few years if McDonald can get things right in Seattle. And I think, again, both those games this year, Thursday Night Football, you're going to hear that. Every storyline will say, this guy's a Shanahan stopper. They're going to play highlights of him beating the Rams and beating San Francisco last year on Christmas Day as part of the Ravens coaching crew. So be prepared to hear it all year long until they get to week 6 or week 7, excuse me. No, it's 6, I'm sorry. And hear it every single minute on that broadcast between Kirk Herbstreit and the no longer, I think, calling games, Al Michaels. So a lot to watch for with the Amazon Thursday night games. But again, short week, you're playing the Cardinals, 2 divisional games back-to-back. Could it be a trap game? Maybe. But I do think San Francisco, at least on paper, should win that game. And I could see them being, 5-1, 6-0, but games are tough. They can lose to the Rams. I can see him losing to Seattle on the road on a short week. So let's say conservatively, they're 5-2 or 4-2. That's a pretty good spot to be in after 6 weeks of the NFL season. But then this is where things start to get a little bumpy. The bye week is in 2 weeks. You're kind of waiting for it. You guys are getting a little tired. You've played the Rams, and you played Arizona, and you play Seattle. Hopefully you've won 2 of those games to have a good divisional record. But then you get to play the game I'm sure everybody has circled on their schedule. You get to play the Kansas City Chiefs at Levi's once again, week 7, I think at 1:25 on Fox. And I'm not going to lie to you, of any game I just don't want to watch, it's this one. Now, obviously, time will tell. That's almost halfway towards, the halfway point of the season. So, we shall see what these teams actually look like. But I'm just so tired of watching Mahomes and Kansas. They're great. They're great. But after losing to them twice in the Super Bowl and getting the pants kicked off of us 2 years ago, ironically, in Brock Purdy's first ever actual game to play in garbage time, I'm just so tired of watching the Chiefs. Like, I only like them when they have them on my fantasy team. Like last year I had Mahomes, Kelsey, and Pacheco. And it's just like, ugh. I hate having to actively root for you to bring me to a fantasy championship, which actually I did win last year. As you can see by this championship belt that I won last year. So pretty happy about that. But I'm just so tired of watching the Chiefs. I'm just like, honestly, I want them to be happy and live a great life. What will be perfect for me is that the Niners beat Kansas City, and then the week after, you hear rumblings of, did Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce break up? Oh my God, is America's couple over? Is the dream ruined? Is love real? And then Brock Purdy's like, I did that. Now, I wish he would have done that in February this past year, but I wouldn't be too upset about that. But again, I wish them all the best in the world. I don't really want to watch this game because I probably know what's going to happen, and so do you. It's like, oh, well, it's 45 to 20. God, I wonder what happens. So, and it just feels like more so than any team, and I get it, Kansas City's great.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
You're at home, you're at Levi Stadium, you're off a short week again, they're off the bye week, I get it, that's not in your favor at all, I understand that, but it just feels like against Kansas City, Shanahan, the defense, they just kind of shrivel up and go back in their turtle shell, and it's like, did you even come to play? And I know in every game they've played Mahomes outside of 2018, they had him beat. Even in the regular season in 2023, they picked him off. They had a lead in the first half and they gave it away because they couldn't score points in the red zone, which seemingly is always a problem for Shanahan against Steve Spagnuolo's defense. So of this entire 18, 17 game schedule, it's like the one game I just don't want to watch. And it's a bummer because I'm sure the entire world does. I just know what's going to happen. And if they win, I'll be like, oh my God, we're over the hump. And I think David Lombardi had the stat that when the Niners kept losing to Dallas pre-dynasty, right, they had to beat them in the regular season to get over the hump. I'm not sure of the years, so forgive me. But what if it takes San Francisco winning in Week 7 against Kansas City on October 20th, 2024, to actually believe they can beat the Chiefs? They've had them beat. Like Lori says, the defense played great in the past Super Bowl. You're right, Lori. The defense played great. They just got tired. It's hard to hold Mahomes to 20 points. It's hard to hold Travis Kelce to one catch for 1 yard at halftime. So, I do think that maybe in Week 7 this year against Kansas City, maybe I'll be more intrigued knowing that it took the dynasty or pre-dynasty Niners to believe, or to beat Dallas in the regular season to believe they can beat him in the playoffs. Maybe it's the same thing for these Niners. You got to beat Kansas City in the regular season in 2024 at Levi Stadium to actually believe you can beat them in the Super Bowl. Maybe that's all hogwash and whatever it is, but, just storylines to discuss during the year, because when you see Mahomes and San Francisco, who at this point, should be 4-2, should be 5-1 or 6-1, whatever it is, they're riding high, the last couple times, it's not been great against the Chiefs. So I'm hoping, I'm begging, Roger Goodell, please, put the fix in for this game and a game in February this year. I'm so tired of losing to Kansas City. Moving on, though. Oh, and that game of the scheduling, I have as a scheduled loss. I'm just going to say it's a loss because San Francisco seemingly hasn't won, but we'll see what the team looks like come Week 7 this year. And that takes us all the way to Dallas, though, which, again, is another one of the 4 games in which San Francisco has to play an opponent off their bye week. Thankfully, though, while Dallas off the bye week, it's Sunday Night Football at home. If you get beat by Kansas City, you get to stay home for a week and go, oh, I'm angry. But we get the Dallas Cowboys, a get-right game, a team that we know we can stomp into the ground and break Dak Prescott. Hey, maybe by Week 8 this year, it's Trey Lance, who the Dallas Cowboys reportedly want to give a long and hard look to in OTAs and training camp this year. And Jerry Jones, he loves Dak, but things are a-changing out there in Big D. Maybe we get Trey Lance against Brock Purdy in prime time. Wouldn't that be something? I know last year when San Francisco just annihilated Dallas 42-10, Trey Lance was the third emergency quarterback, and I was sitting there like, no, put him in the game. Obviously, they couldn't. But, man, wouldn't, the Niner fans that were pro-Trey till they die will just be, oh my goodness, they're gushing everywhere like, this guy. And the people who were like, hey, we like Trey's fine, are going to be quiet and live their life. And the pro or the anti-Trey are going to be like, oh, we hate Trey. It'll just be a very fun thing to sit back and watch from a bird's eye view. But again, it's the Dallas Cowboys, so of course It's prime time, 5:20 on NBC, Collinsworth and Tirico, hopefully, fingers crossed. And, surprisingly, although San Francisco has had Dallas's number in recent years, the overall series record's only 20-19-1. And they're only 11-10 at home against Dallas. So these teams have been really close throughout their existence, right? Now, San Francisco has won for the previous 7 matchups, including the last 3 against Dallas. And I think outside, not including playoffs, I think this would be, maybe I'm wrong, I think it's the 3rd time Dallas would be at Levi Stadium in the regular season. They crushed us, I think, in 2015 or 16 when they first had Dak and Zeke. Then last year we crushed them at home. So we're even at home at Levi Stadium. So hopefully we can, break that regular season tie. And this is, weirdly enough, San Francisco is 4-1 against Dallas in prime time. So maybe there is some magic under the bright lights at Levi Stadium. And honestly, this is the game I think everybody has circled compared to Kansas City, where no one has that game circled. At least if you're a Niner fan, you want to see San Francisco play Dallas. This game will be covered by Fox Sports, FS1, ESPN, Micah Parsons against Nick Bosa, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Trey Lance coming back to the Bay, Mike McCarthy, Jerry Jones, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, all of this, Fred Warner. It's going to be crazy. You know what's funny enough? Or you know what's funny? I could probably argue that the best player on the field in this game probably going to be Demo Lenore. This is a game where Lenore just gets up for. He probably gets beat a few times against Kansas City. He probably loses that game, right? He's angry. He's pissed. He's a feisty SOB. I would not be surprised if this game is a midseason Lenore classic. Whether it's against Brandon Cooks or whoever else the Dallas Cowboys had. They signed nobody this offseason, and I don't think they drafted a receiver. It's CeeDee Lamb. Maybe I'm wrong, but they got CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and kind of nobody else out there in Dallas. So an odd year for Dallas. I have a hard time believing San Francisco would lose back-to-back games at home, especially one in prime time against the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose against KC, it ain't the worst thing in the world. Yeah, it's Mahomes and it stinks, but it's the AFC opponent who you're likely not going to have to play until the end of this year if you actually get to where you want to be when it's all said and done. So lose against KC for all I care. Beat Dallas, conference opponent, prime time, at home, take it to Dallas, and hopefully ride into the bye week sitting back going, okay, you beat the Jets, you beat the Vikings, you beat the Patriots, you beat the Cardinals, and you beat Seattle, you beat Dallas. And you could be 6-2 heading into the bye week. And that's scheduled losses against maybe the Rams and Kansas City. Maybe you lose to Seattle and you beat the Rams. Either way, you walk into the bye week 6-2, having beaten at least 2 of the 3 divisional opponents you've had, and at that point, lost 1 game in the entire conference. I mean, you're sitting pretty. I'm sure McCaffrey's setting records and Bosa's back to who he was because his body's right again for a full year on his boat out in Florida. You're feeling pretty good about where you are, knowing the second half of the season is staring at you dead in the face, looking at you like the freaking Balrog. I'm getting super nerdy here, but the Balrog and Gandalf sitting there like, you shall not pass in Lord of the Rings and the Fellowship of the Ring. That's what it's going to look like. It's a daunting second half of the season for San Francisco. So let's dive into it, okay? You're off the bye week. You're hopefully healthy. Debo's healthy. Trent's healthy. Brock Purdy's lighting it up. McCaffrey's having a great year. Bosa's playing well. Malik Mustafa's lighting it up. Pearsall looks like a really good receiver. All things are good. You're 6-2. And then you get to walk in to Florida. Nick Bosa gets to go back home to Florida and take on his favorite quarterback to play, Baker. Nick Bosa off the bye week, fully healthy, fully rested, off his couch after doing like 70 different leg exercises is like, I'm gonna crush Baker Mayfield on week 10 after the bye week. And I think that's an easy game. I know they have Mike Evans and they got Chris Godwin and Baker Mayfield, 3 years, $100 million extension. Baker's still Baker. Like, that is a signed, sealed, delivered, hopefully. Fingers crossed, right? Nothing is guaranteed in the NFL. If there was, we'd have 2 rings in the last 5 years. But you get Baker off the bye week. That's a game you should win in Florida. You're rested across the country. I get it, but you have time to rest to get healthy. And it's funny, and funny we talk about this. Last year, San Francisco, off the bye week, went to Jacksonville and destroyed the Jaguars in Florida. Could the same thing happen this year? Everything's a circle like Star Wars. It's all poetry, right? So we shall see, but I would like to think that game is a scheduled W. Then you get Seattle. Week 11, off of their bye week. But here's the difference. Now you're at home. And I like to believe, if you're Kyle Shanahan, if maybe you lost to Seattle early in the year, short week, Thursday Night Football, now it's a even week for you. They're off the bye, you're back at home, you're off the bye week, 2 weeks removed, you guys are feeling good, you stomped on Tampa Bay, and let's say that Mike McDonald, Seattle Seahawks, stunned you early in the year. Now is your time to take it to them at Levi's and get your revenge. Like, I have a hard time believing San Francisco is going to get swept by any opponent this year. Now, to be fair, Shanahan, for what it's worth, has trouble with the AFC North defenses. Jim Schwartz, the Bengals, I'm forgetting, his first name is Lou, and I'm forgetting his name. But Lou with Cincinnati and McDonald. I would like to think Shanahan is going to have a little vendetta towards McDonald and his defense if they happen to lose to them early in the year. So I think both these games are scheduled wins, or should be, if all things, go well. Because you're at home. You're rested, you're healthy, you're feeling pretty good. And again, if that's the case, you're 8-2. You're like, wow, man. Then you go, uh-oh, thank God we're 8-2, because the next part's so hard to get through. This is not fun. Then you go week 12, November 24th, not Thanksgiving, mind you, thankfully. You go to Green Bay, to Lambeau Field, where it might be chilly, you might see your own breath, you might get throwbacks to the 2022, is that the year? 2022 playoffs where Talanoa Funga grabs the punt up, scores a touchdown, leads San Francisco to a nail-biting, gutsy, in the frozen tundra of Lambeau postseason win to then take on the Rams in the NFC Championship game. I had COVID during that time. I was sitting at home yelling and screaming like, yay, yay, when that game was happening. It was awesome. I need to go back to Lambeau this year. Jordan Love. Look, this game to me feels like a loss. And now, between Buffalo and the Packers, this game, more so than the Bills, would be a win. But I really like what Jordan Love and LaFleur is doing out there in Green Bay. They almost beat us last year. They should have beat us last year. They killed the Cowboys last year. Like, I am really high on what the Packers are doing. Now, again, this is week number 12. The team could look different, right? Guys can get hurt. Some players just stink that year. But it's the Devondre Campbell revenge game. Why would I root against that? No, I'm kidding. But I just think if this game was at Levi's, different story. This is part of the schedule where you look at Brock Purdy and go, okay, you were great last year, but where did you struggle most? It wasn't certain opponents. It wasn't, in the biggest moments. It was when the weather played a factor. And I don't think the snow would be an issue for Purdy as much as the rain would be, but I know the Niners have owned the Packers like Lori says here, Shanahan owns LaFleur. Shanny owns LaFleur. He does. You're right. But I just think, despite that, it's kind of like McVay. Shanahan owns McVay and LaFleur and all those things, and I so get it. And it's hard for me to be not optimistic. But if that game was at Levi's compared to Lambeau, I would go, oh, this should be a win, or it'll be a tough-fought victory. But it's in Lambeau. Maybe it's snowing. I don't love that. It's across the country. You're a warm state team going to... Now, to be fair, San Francisco has shown the ability to win in Lambeau when it's snowing. So it's not as if they can't win. And who's to say Jordan Love doesn't play poorly in that game either? Now, all that to say, I do think this is the part of the schedule where things get really tight and we go, uh-oh, the Rams are 5-4, 5-3 on our heels, and we lose to Green Bay because it's cold and Purdy's small hands can't get it done and the ball slips here and there, and now things get scary against the Buffalo Bills. And I do think if there are two games on the docket, I'm trying to think back to 2000, I think it was 22. Maybe, no, it was 21. 2021. Trey Lance's first year here, they had the amazing diamond patch on the jerseys. They were gorgeous, gorgeous jerseys. San Francisco had to play, I'm trying to think of who it was. It was the Bengals. They had a really tough stretch of games in 2021. They had to put like a horrible stretch. It was like the Bengals and somebody else, and they ended up just running through that entire grouping, and it was awesome to see. See if I can pull it up here. I apologize. It's live shows, folks. I'm sorry. They had to play the Vikings, Seattle, the Bengals, and the Falcons. And the Vikings were pretty good that year. Kirk Cousins was still there, obviously. They had Seattle, who they lost to when they wore the alternate whites, and they blew that game late, and they fumbled a few times. I think Jimmy threw a pick or two. That was like the amazing Kittle sideline catch where he's running and he's almost falling out of bounds and he scores 2 touchdowns and they still lose. And they play the Bengals, and that's the Ayuk touchdown where he dives for the pylon and they score a touchdown late in the game. Like, that reminds me of this, where it's like, you probably shouldn't beat Green Bay. But, because, the Bengals had Burrow, they had Higgins, they had Chase. They're a really good team with a really good quarterback that was young at the time still, post his rookie year injury. This kind of feels like that, where it's like, you probably shouldn't win this game. Like, that game had Ambry Thomas, who was horrible, was getting mossed by everybody on Cincinnati. You were like, how are we going to win this game? That game kind of feels like this, albeit San Francisco's defense is much better. But I can see LaFleur and Green Bay holding it down against San Francisco on the road. So, for the sake of being fair, I'm just going to say it's a loss, because I can see that game being a loss, which brings you to a next tough game, because this is the final game on San Francisco's schedule in which they're playing opponents off of their bye week, right? Week 13, December 1st, you've gone from Green Bay, now you have to go to Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. Man. When I saw Josh Allen in 2020, which was a horrible year for everybody for a variety of reasons, but sticking to football, Josh Allen beat Kyle Shanahan so bad in Phoenix because the state of California wouldn't let the Niners play at Levi's because of COVID restrictions, right? Shanahan watched Josh Allen annihilate his defense so bad that he literally said, I need to get a quarterback like that, and traded 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance. Now, think if you want to have Trey Lance, but Josh Allen, having only played San Francisco, I believe, once ever in his entire career, has just killed, for lack of better terms, the Niners defense. And they're going to be at home. You're on the road. I have a hard time believing San Francisco. Like, do you go back home in between Green Bay and Buffalo? Do you stay on the East Coast? Like, what do you do? Do you stay in New Jersey at the Greenbrier? I know the team hates doing that. San Francisco doesn't mind it. Do you stay in Ohio? Right? So, man, like, these two games, like, I can see them beating the Packers. I have a hard time believing they're going to beat the Bills. And I don't even think the Bills are that good. Like, they lost a lot of people. It is a revolving door of talent this year. They cut a ton of people. And this is, I think, a make or break year for Sean McDermott with Buffalo. So I think, he's pulling out all the stops this year. You're at home against Kyle Shanahan. This is almost more of a prove-it game to the Bills than it would be San Francisco, just based off preseason assumptions of what the year might look like, right? Again, like, I have no problem if San Francisco goes 0-2 against the Chiefs and the Bills. Okay, cool. I'd rather you beat Green Bay. They have Keon Coleman, they have Curtis Samuel, they have, I think it's Khalil Shakur. As Laurie again, always there right on time. Do they have any receivers? Not many good ones, or proven ones, I'll say. But I don't know. Like, I know we like, and Mahomes is phenomenal. Josh Allen is one of those quarterbacks that will win you or could win you any game, but can also lose you any game because he plays hero ball so much. And, you just maybe beat Green Bay, lost to Green Bay, you're on the road. Do you go back home? Do you take the risk of going all the way back to Santa Clara and San Jose and have the guys sleep in their own beds for 3 or 4 5 days, then travel all the way back to Buffalo in the snow potentially? I think that plays a massive factor in this conversation. I just think it's Josh Allen, maybe in the snow, like, that favors him. And again, elements, could this be a game for Brock Purdy? And also, maybe we get the Frank Gore Jr. game against his dad's former team. So who knows? There's so many ties everywhere. I love it. Every game has like a legacy tie. It's awesome. I think your name is Melaniac. I hope so. Says everyone's crowning Love as the next up. There's a whole lot to be seen before that's real. Matt Castle was 11-5. You're right. But Matt Castle was 11-5. I think signed with Kansas City, and it was kind of a nobody, right, Melaniac? So I get it. To be fair, I do think Jordan Love has already shown more than Matt Castle has done in regards to his play style. Now, he's a young quarterback still. I just think the potential has obviously been on display. And if he can find it for year 2 and build upon last year, I see no doubt in my mind that Jordan Love could be a top 10 quarterback when it's all said and done by the end of this year. That said, gotta go prove it. Brock Purdy almost won the MVP last year. And I love me some Brock Purdy, but I don't want to ignore that Jordan Love could be really good this year. But I think these are kind of back-to-back cold weeks game. You're in the winter, you're November, you're December. It's just not a great thing for San Francisco. They haven't beaten Buffalo since 2012. Now, to be fair, they beat the Bills 45-3 that day, but they haven't won in over a decade. Now, to also be fair, they're 6-7 against Buffalo all time, and they're 2-0 against the Bills on Sunday Night Football. So, again, just like Dallas, maybe there is some primetime magic for San Francisco against Buffalo, but, I think if you split these two games, that's a win compared to, realistically, you could lose 2 of these games and come back home and face Caleb Williams and Keenan Allen and Roma Dunze and DJ Moore and the rebuilt Chicago Bears with the fingernails painted and the goo goo gaga of, pretty all over them right now with the Chicago Bears. So I'll say they split for the sake of it, but I can see them losing both of these games. That brings us to Week 14 versus Chicago. You're back at home, out of the cold, hopefully, back in the winter air of Santa Clara, if you can even call it that, against Chicago. This game is tough because I think the Bears will be good, but I don't think they'll be better than Detroit. I don't even think they'll be better than the Packers. So, and I also don't think Chicago's going to be a playoff team. Like, I am an Oklahoma Sooner fan. I have family there. I have ties to Oklahoma. I watched Caleb Williams as a rookie, as a freshman at Oklahoma. He was awesome. And he was awesome at USC, but there wasn't much structure around him. So I do want to see how he plays in structure in the NFL and an NFL offense, which I think he will excel at, but I want to see it first. Like Cliff Kingsbury, I get it. That offensive line sucked. Shout out Jarrett Kingston. But I just think that, I want to see Caleb Williams prove it in the NFL before I say, the Bears are going to win this game. And there's also a chance Keenan Allen's hurt by this point in the year or coming back off an injury at this point in the year. I think Chicago's defense is getting better. I don't think it's great. And you're at home. Hopefully it's not raining at this time during the year for the Niners. And, you lose maybe 2 games on the road, Green Bay, Buffalo, you're back home in your own bed. You want to get right. Young, rookie quarterback. Couldn't think of a better way. Now, you wish it was a team like the Patriots again, or like the Commanders, but you get Caleb Williams, number 1 overall pick, to get right against at home. I think San Francisco wins this game. They're a better team. Chicago, sure. Is there a way San Francisco loses against Green Bay and Buffalo and they have their heads down and they're hanging and they're like, we lost 2 in a row. Could this be that 3-game losing streak? I could see that, sure. But I have a hard time believing that this team, this leadership, more specifically, would let that happen against a team like Chicago. You can lose against Green Bay. They're on the come up. You can lose against the Bills. They have Josh Allen. That's fine. What you can't do is then lose against Chicago. At home, fans will be livid. I work in sports radio. I can hear it now. KNVR, 95.7 the game. I can't believe they lost to Caleb Williams of all people. You can just hear it now. And I want to sit there and say, oh boy. Hopefully I'm doing post-game this year for 95.7 the game, and it'll be that for me too. You lost 3 games in a row? Seriously? Obviously, time will tell. But I don't think they're going to lose against Chicago. Different regimes, mind you, different quarterbacks. I don't think they've played Chicago at home in a while. They beat them in 2021. That was the Jimmy G homecoming game where him and Deebo Samuel saved it for them. Then they lost to them in 2022 in the rain in Chicago. So it's been a long time since Chicago's come back to Levi's. What a perfect time. California kid, Caleb Williams, USC, come to lose to San Francisco at home at Levi's. And that brings us to the next primetime game, Thursday Night Football at home against the LA Rams. This, I think, is a game where if you beat the Rams earlier in the year at SoFi, while Shanahan owns McVay, and look, we always say this every year, right? McVay's going to get one. He has the one. It's the one that matters, but I do think the Rams, they obviously aren't the Niners' kryptonite because we beat them all the time. But I just think the Rams are a team this year I would not be surprised if we split with. I think they're really good. And I think that, they're kind of on the last legs of the Stafford era in LA. And I think that they've remade their team enough to be viable. And I think they're young enough that they're susceptible earlier in the year, but late in the year, I think that's when the young players start playing better. Now, this could also be a game where San Francisco has a more acclimated Talanoa Hufanga, which we saw what he did against Stafford a handful of years ago with the pick 6 to end that game. I think on Monday Night Football as well, so, who knows, but this is a game where I could see San Francisco actually losing to the Rams. And actually beating them on the road early in the year, and then McVay getting a revenge game against Shanahan late in the season to even up the score, setting up a really, really fun ending to the 2024 season. I don't know who decided this. I hate the ending of the year for the Niners. Not just the second half, where it's Tampa Bay, Seattle, or at Tampa Bay, at home against Seattle, at Green Bay, at Buffalo, against Chicago, at the Rams, or versus the Rams. Then you have to go to Miami. Then you have to go back home against Detroit in primetime. Then you have the Cardinals in Arizona. Now, it's not the end of the world. Like, you do have advantages in some places, right? Like, week 16 against Miami, it's pre-Christmas. You're going back to Florida. Nick Bosa's home. He should have fun. McDaniel and Shanahan and Purdy and Tua and Tyreek Hill and Deebo Samuel. Like, there are a lot of ties, right? There's a lot of fun to be had. Ironically, Brock Purdy gets to go to play where Dan Marino, or at least against the team Dan Marino used to play for, was Purdy's, kind of coming out party when Jimmy G got hurt against the Dolphins 2 years ago. Now he gets to go play in Miami against them, which is really cool to see. And San Francisco would have the long week advantage playing at the Rams Thursday Night Football the week prior, and then playing the Dolphins on Sunday on December 22nd, 10 days in between those two games. So San Francisco would have the advantage, and the good thing about playing the Dolphins late in the year is I don't believe in the Dolphins. Last year, I will eat crow on this. I was someone, and it looked good for so long, that predicted Niners, Dolphins, Super Bowl. And I said San Francisco was going to win. Now, I think had that happened, San Francisco would have won. But I do think that there are questions about the Dolphins late in the year, mainly when the weather gets cold. Now, I've never been to Florida. Maybe you have. I don't know how cold it gets out there. I know it gets humid, really humid. I don't know how cold it gets out there. But I know when it gets late in the year, it gets cold, you aren't as fast, the hits hurt a little more in a team like the Dolphins that relies so much on their speed. I don't think playoff football, late December, mind you, January and February favors them. And I think going to Miami, where it's hopefully a little chilly with 10 days of rest, I do think San Francisco would actually win this game. I think Shanahan will, like he did LaFleur, like he did McVay, I think he will actually kind of own Mike McDaniel early in his tenure with the Dolphins. I think San Francisco wins this game. I know they're going from California to Florida, but 10 days off, should be rested. And if you lose against the Rams, you're going to want to beat the Dolphins in Miami, which then sets up probably, I think, of all the games, this is probably going to be not just the most important game, but also probably the best game of the year. Now, it could get ugly if San Francisco's first half mimics the playoff first half they had against this team. But San Francisco hosting the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football, December 30th. I think this is going to be the best game of the year. This is the epitome of two different coaching styles, aggressive and conservative. It's Goff and it's Purdy. It's last year's playoff game. It's the Ladybug catch. Ayuk and Deebo got hurt. Then you have the Lions and Jahmyr Gibbs that had the game won and they let it go. Like, during that playoff game, me and Mark Grandy were gearing up to host the post-game show on 95.7 The Game. And my boss, Matt Nehigian, texted me and said, get on Twitter Spaces now and tell me what the F is going on with this game. We were on Twitter Spaces on 95.7 The Game, and we were going ballistic, questioning the team, and rightfully so. The effort, the run defense to go all that way and play the way they did was horrible. Then the second half began, and it was one of the greatest comebacks I've ever seen in Niner history. Now, I'm 27 years old, going on 28. I grew up in arguably one of the worst times to be a fan of this team, but I've seen the Harbaugh era, the Shanahan era. That game against Detroit was amazing to watch. And I think knowing all that, hoping everyone's healthy, win or lose, hopefully it's a win or lose, this game is going to be straight up fireworks. Fireworks. Chase Lucas revenge game, who's now with San Francisco. I think the offenses are relatively evenly matched. They do things so well. Ben Johnson stayed with Detroit for one more go-round. Man, it's going to be fun to see what this game is. And this could be a pivotal game for San Francisco because just looking at the schedule here in my head, you beat the Jets, you beat the Vikings, say you beat the Rams, you beat New England, you beat the Cardinals. Let's say you lose to Seattle early in the year, you lose to Kansas City, okay? Going into week 8, you're 5-2. You beat Dallas at home, you go into the bye week 6-2. You beat Tampa Bay, you're 7-2. You beat Seattle, you're 8-2. You lose to Green Bay, you lose to Buffalo, you're 8-4. Okay, you beat Chicago, you're 9-4. You lose to the Rams, short week, Thursday Night Football, 9-5. Beat Miami, you're 10-5. You're 10-5, okay? With 2 games left in the year. It's probably going to take 11 to 12 games to win the division again, knowing the Rams are better, knowing Seattle probably going to split somewhere with you, if not also split with the Rams. You got to have the conference record. You got to have the divisional record. And yes, you have to be the Cardinals in the season finale. But I think this game, just like last year was, with the Lions and Dallas, I would not be surprised if this game is arguably the most pivotal game of the season for San Francisco if all things play out how I predict them to, which, who knows, right? Who knows? But I think this game is so important to both teams. I think for Detroit, I think the Packers might be on their heels. I just think this game means so much. I think Shanahan with the Niners, I think he's 3-0 against the Lions because he beat him in 2018, I think, at home at Levi's. That was before Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL against Kansas City. Then they beat them in 2021, the Trey Lance first touchdown of the year game where Verrett tore his ACL and Mostert got hurt early in that game. And they beat him last year. So, Shanahan has owned the Lions, if you can say that, I believe. But I do think that San Francisco, this is a game they have to win. This is really a game they have to win, knowing just how good the Lions are. And I also wouldn't be shocked if this was, a Super, or not Super Bowl, but a NFC Championship game playoff preview for one of these two teams. You can get into, the overpaid Jared Goff, this, that, and the other. Goff is fine. Goff has played really well. Now, pause. Jared Goff also is who Jared Goff has always been. Really good for 3/4 of a year. When it matters most, falls apart. Now, that said, I don't think Jared Goff is the reason that we beat them last year. I don't think so. Josh Reynolds dropped 2 pivotal passes that would have iced that game for them. Jahmyr Gibbs fumbled because Deshaun Gibson made an amazing play and so did Armstead. So, I don't hold Jared Goff as the reason they lost that game. I just think a lot of luck, a lot of ladybug luck had to go in San Francisco's favor last year. This is a game where, games like Dallas and the Lions, although both those teams aren't in our division, those 2 games are probably going to be the biggest trash talk games, the biggest hype games on Twitter. It's going to be an overall, fans getting their hands dirty, words being thrown apart, from sideline to sideline. I know Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's now in Philadelphia again, not in Detroit, but, these 2 teams do not like each other anymore. And, again, I'm 27. Detroit's always an afterthought to me because they were so bad for so long. But even the Harbaugh era had issues with Detroit. Remember the handshake and the back push, and Schwartz was like, I'm going to get you. Which, funny enough, Shanahan can't beat Jim Schwartz. So, again, it's all a circle. It's Star Wars. It's all poetry. So I do think this is going to be an awesome game to watch. Like, you're going to get Laporta and Kittle and Purdy and Goff and McCaffrey and Gibbs and Debo, Amon-Ra, Ayuk, and Williams. Like, you're going to have an awesome game to watch. You're going to have Hutchinson and Bosa and DJ Readers now in Detroit with Malik Collins and Javon Hargrave. Like, this game is going to be star-studded everywhere. And I think that, man, like, honestly, like, I think San Francisco probably going to lose this game. And now, to give you a little peek into my psyche, I am someone with the Niners is like the ultimate optimist. Let everything play out. Don't overreact. Like, to be just super honest with you, there have been times where I've been like, you know what? I'm going to force this content out. This should be big news, and it's not. And I'm like, well, why'd I do that? That's dumb. That's me being dishonest. And I don't want to do that. And so, the pessimist in me, would say San Francisco is not going to win this game. You won last year. You got lucky. Things had to go your way. Football's football, sure. But, how long does that last, right? This is a good team. San Francisco at this mark is like 10-6 for me. And I would have them beating the Cardinals week 18. It'd be 11-6 to end the year. Could that be an NFC West crown? Probably. And it should be. It should be. Will it? Who knows? I just think that, like, the schedule, like, when you walk through, team by team, week by week, I think it kind of a mixed bag of good and bad. Like, it is a really good chance to begin the year hot, be 5-0, be 6-2 going into the bye week. Even if you're 5-3 going into the bye week, that's okay. It's a good spot to be in. 2 games above 500. You just have to hope you beat the Rams, Cardinals, and Seahawks. Because we all know the easiest way to go to the playoffs is through your division. Whether you're number 1 seed, the number 4 seed, it don't matter. Just win your division. So, I think when it's all said and done, I think San Francisco splits against Seattle. I think they split against the Rams. And I think they sweep the Cardinals. Now, playoffs, we'll get into that when week 1 is approaching, a little closer to preseason and the NFL regular season. But Lori Matthews from Phoenix says 12-5 again, NFC Championship game, book it. Lori, I love the optimism. I won't go that far. I will not go that far. That said, I think 11-6 is kind of a good mark for them. I don't think they'll go 13-4. I can see 12-5, but I think 11-6 much more of a conservative choice. I think they'll lose a few more games they likely should have won this year. I think Seattle being better than they were last year certainly helps, at least schematically wise. Bobo's going 13-4, repeat of last year. Like, I love the confidence. I don't want my 11-6, which is the lowest total on the board currently, to be not confident. I just think that, teams are getting better. And while I do think San Francisco got better, they kind of got better in a different way. They didn't add all pro talent. They got more durable. They got veterans. And they had 8 draft picks. Many of them could impact this year. Which, that could be a great thing. That could be the difference maker. Who knows? And look, it's not like San Francisco had to get too much better. They had the Chiefs beat in the Super Bowl, and I can argue their biggest detriment was a right guard. They got Dominic Puni, and they had to get somebody else that could separate outside of Ayuk because Debo wasn't playing and Kittle had 1 catch for 3 yards. Insert Ricky Pearsall. And so I think that overall the schedule favors San Francisco in the first half. Some tough games, Kansas City, Dallas, Seattle, Thursday night, the Rams. Like, you have to win those games, the Jets and Monday Night Football. But I think overall, the first half of the year definitely leans more in San Francisco's favor. In the second half, then you get to the second half of the year and you have this weird kind of spooky stretch of they do call, the spooky mama season, October to December. The freaks come out at night. If you've seen Scooby-Doo, the first one on VHS, shout out Freddie Prinze Jr., the freaks come out at night when the winter months come out. So, there may be a stretch of the season against Green Bay and Buffalo and Chicago and the Rams, Miami and Detroit. Those are heavy hitters. Those are really heavy hitting games. And I think the Niners, and this is one perk of being in the media, they gave us this stat today, if I can find it really quickly. Here it is. The Niners in 2024 face 8 teams that reached the postseason in 2023. The Bills, Cowboys, Lions, Packers, Chiefs, Rams, Dolphins, and Tampa Bay. And they play one team, the Seahawks, who finished above 500. So I do think that this year is not going to be easy. It's never easy. But I do think for the Niners this year, it's pivotal. Probably more so than last year. Knowing how tough the second half of the year is in 2024, you have to get off to a hot start. The hot start, like last year, 5-0. If you start 5-3, 6-2, you're setting yourself up for a playoff run because you're going to win a handful of games to end the year. But I think you have to get above double digits to win the NFC West. Knowing the Rams are good, Seattle improved, the Cardinals also improved. And your schedule is overall tough. You have the 12th toughest schedule in football this year in regards to opponents' win percentage last year. And you're playing 8 playoff teams from last year, including every team you played. You play the Packers, the Lions, and Kansas City. You have literally every rematch you can want from last year. Just fingers crossed they win 2 of those, hopefully against the Lions and the Packers. Honestly, there are games I don't care about on the docket. Chiefs game, don't care about too much. Just don't care. Bills game, oh, it's cool. Josh Allen, that's great. Whatever. Who cares? I'd rather you beat the Rams, the Cardinals, the Lions, Chicago, Green Bay, Tampa Bay, Seattle, Dallas over the Bills and Kansas City. In fact, I would probably make those 2 scheduled losses for this team. And if I want to get crazy and nuts, I'm sure come week 1 of the regular season, I'll say they'll be 11-6. They'll win the NFC West, and they'll be in the Super Bowl. Now, let's take a step back, though. This is a schedule release reaction. We ain't getting that far. OTAs start Monday. OTAs start May 20th. They start Monday, which I should be at, by the way. Can't wait. Best part of the year for me. It's awesome. But with slower roll, I think it favors them early, not so much late. There's a couple of games you have to win late, but if you win enough early, it makes games like the Bills game, the Dolphins game, and others late just not mean as much. Now, you'd love to be 17-0, but they don't favor you. I'm just thankful I don't have to freaking go on Peacock and Netflix and ESPN Plus to watch my team play. I'm moving to SoCal. I got a hard enough time finding the game out there. I'm happy I don't have to go to 17 different streaming services to watch my team play. You got Amazon, I got that, and you got cable television. And I can illegally stream those elsewhere. So I hope you like the schedule. Tell me what you think of it in the comments below. Some people like Bobo, who is always a great listen and watch, says, and Brock Purdy wins the MVP. Will Brock Purdy win the MVP in 2024? I don't know. A lot to look at and dive into with the schedule. Hope you'd enjoyed the entire show. An hour and 20 minutes, almost an hour and a half, discussing the 2024 San Francisco 49ers regular season schedule. What do you think of it? Which games do you think are scheduled wins and scheduled losses? What is the one game you just have no business, don't even care about? And tell me the games below that you do care about the most. Is it Lions, the Rams, Seattle, Is it Kansas City of all teams, of all games? Tell me down below in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to YouTube and the audio platforms. You can also follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X for Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. If you want to go to any game, the schedule's out. Tickets are available. Use promo code 49ersaccess at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Thank you so much for watching, listening, liking, sharing, and subscribing. And until next time, stay faithful.